Welcome to the Gab Lab, a show where we tinker with titillating topics and explore the effulgent excellence of existence. We cover a wide range of subjects that are sure to intrigue you, so stick around and stay curious.
Gab Lab.
In today's episode of the Gab Lab, I will be talking with Torea Rodriguez. This is a really fun episode. I think anyone who is dealing with chronic illness or autoimmune disorders would really benefit from hearing Torea's story. After completing her undergraduate degree in biochemistry, Torea has embodied transformation and self-discovery. She's worked at some of the leading .com Silicon Valley companies, has held executive positions, and she used to be a professional pilot flying jets for private families and charter companies out of the San Francisco Bay Area. Her diagnosis of 2 debilitating autoimmune diseases brought her back to biochemistry, not only achieving full remission, but also a certification as a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. During that time, discovered her love for coaching and the process of transformation. Today, Torea is an expert coach, wilderness retreat leader, and former professional pilot. She's been a functional medicine practitioner for more than a decade, and she works with clients all over the world to support and help reverse chronic illness and putting symptoms into remission. She also curates exceptional transformational experiences for clients in health, wellness, and business. Her methodologies are based in functional medicine and neurolinguistic programming principles, yet takes it to a whole new level with her self-designed bio-neuro blueprint process, so clients can understand and support their entire being by addressing not only the physical, but also the emotional, spiritual, and energetic bodies. She's passionate that every client can live their lives to the full, no-holds-barred version of their dreams. She leads the Wellness Curiosity Collective private community, the unique 12-week transformational academy that can be enhanced with functional medicine and or personalized one-to-one work. In addition to being an active practitioner with Mycology Psychology, she also hosts the Wildly Optimized Wellness podcast and curates several in-person retreats across the country each year. Hello, Torea. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Michael. I'm happy to be here. This is exciting.
Yeah, super excited to have you on. And we had talked a few times and with the Mycology Psychology group. And then you sent me over your bio, and I didn't realize like you have a very diverse and accomplished bio. So congratulations on all the things you've accomplished in your life.
Thank you. I think that's a culmination of having many, many interests and also having the ability to go deep on some things, which is kind of what's led to the various different career shifts in my history. So it's been fun.
Yeah, super cool. I mean, I was like looking at your bio and I was like, I don't even know where to begin, but I definitely want to start with like just like your career of flying jets. Like that sounds
Sure.
so cool. Like I've actually like dreamt of like being a pilot myself. So like if you could just share like how you started that, like how that was for you.
Yeah, so it wasn't on my radar. I was working in Silicon Valley in tech companies, and my husband and I got married and we honeymooned in Alaska. And one of our dear close friends from college is born and raised in Alaska, and she had just recently learned how to fly her dad's airplane because it's a way of life up there. That's how they transport around. And so she got to kind of participate in some of our honeymoon shenanigans, and she flew us to a couple different locations. And when we were flying with her, I was just kind of like, wow, this is really cool that here she is. She's flying an airplane. And maybe I could kind of pick that up as a hobby or something, because I was definitely feeling the like cubicle burnout thing going on at that time. And So we came back from honeymoon and I started lessons. And the way my husband tells the story is within 3 days, I came home and basically announced that I was going to change careers and become a professional pilot. And I'm doing this. And that's pretty much what happened. I basically treated it like a master's degree. So I
Yeah.
would study at night and then I'd get my arse up in the morning super early and I'd be at the airport at 6:30 doing a lesson or doing a simulator lesson, like it didn't really matter. And then I'd go do my day job and I'd rinse and repeat. And I did that for about 3 years to work through all of the different civilian trainings. And then became a flight instructor, did that part-time. And when I finally got enough of a client base, I went full-time. And
Wow.
so I
So
did flight instruction for a number of years before I started getting into charter.
yeah. So that's amazing. I mean, I've heard of people going through flight school, and it usually takes them a lot longer than 3 years, because of all the hours you have to get. So that's amazing you're able to
Yeah,
do it that quick. And did you have your own plane, or like did you rent a plane? Like,
no,
yeah,
I had to rent a plane at the local flight school. And so any of my Silicon Valley like salary was basically being shuttled, over to the plane rental and instructor, paying the instructors for that. Um,
gotcha. Yeah,
it cost about the same as a master's degree at the end of the day.
yeah.
So that's kind of, I was weighing it out between that or going back to grad school. And so that's what I ended up choosing to do.
Wow, that's super cool. And
Yeah.
you're flying like private families, just kind of like private flights kind of thing.
Yeah. So I kind of knew that I wasn't really interested in doing the airline thing. Like I wasn't interested in doing the same shuttle or the same routes all the time. So I was looking at charter and I was looking at corporate, and both of those are similar.
Hmm.
Um, where you're on a variable schedule. And so I started flying for a charter company, moved into turboprops with them. And while I was working at the charter company, that's when I ended up getting my jet type rating. And so I got my jet type rating, and it was actually corporate, so private family who had jets based out of the Oakland airport that I flew with them and their other pilots in their crews. So I kind of did a mix of both. And then, of course, in 2008, the charter company went bankrupt.
Okay.
So I
Yeah.
ended up doing a lot of private family work and
Mm.
flying turboprops and jets that way. And so I did all of that up until I got a medical diagnosis that was particularly hard to treat, and took a leave of absence. So that was in 2010 is
Okay.
when I took a leave of absence and took a quite a detour, shall we
Yeah.
say.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was that's definitely like something I wanted to segue into is how I mean it's just you hear this so much with people in their healing process. A lot of times people begin with their own healing and they get really
Mhm.
into functional medicine or herbalism or natural living. And you had shared that you had some autoimmune disorders that kind of
Yeah,
drove you down the path to functional diagnostic nutrition. And I was just wondering if you could like share a little bit about that and your experience.
sure. So in aviation, I'm going to back up back to aviation for a little bit. When you ever get a diagnosis or a prescription medication, you need to declare it with the FAA. And so I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's. Pretty
Okay.
common.
Yeah.
Thought it was going to be an easy thing, right? So I declared the medication that I was taking. They had put me on Synthroid at the time. I was working with an endocrinologist. And because when you declare, you end up getting put into a different classification for your medical. It's called special issuance medical. And that just basically means I get to go see the aviation medical doctor more often. But it also meant for me, for Hashimoto's, they wanted to see a particular blood marker, TSH, in a particular range. 1 to 5 doesn't sound super hard to get the TSH in between 1 and 5, but they needed to see consistent lab reports that showed that it's stable in that range.
Okay.
My story, though, is that we couldn't get it stable. it would be 0.01, and then it would be 15, and then it would be 3, and then it would be 12. And it was just going all over the place. And so it was it was about a month before I had to go see my aviation medical examiner. And I was in the endocrinologist's office, and I said, look, we got to get this stable. What are we going to do? And he's like, I don't really know what else to do except for irradiate the thyroid and cut out the rest of the tissue. And I was like,
No.
No,
Oh my
that's a
gosh.
little extreme. And it didn't resonate with me very well, because Hashimoto's is a very common issue amongst women. There are millions of women that are treating their Hashimoto's, not with surgery. And so I just elected at that point. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you. Is it an overactive thyroid? Is that what's going on?
Hashimoto's is characterized as an underactive thyroid.
Okay.
It is
Okay.
related to an overactive thyroid condition. The name is escaping me at the moment, of course, because we're recording. But Graves' disease. So Graves is when the thyroid is overactive. Hashimoto's is when it's underactive. A lot of people start with Graves, and then because it does enough damage to the tissue in the thyroid, then they end up with Hashimoto's.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was an underactive thyroid. And I just decided that I was going to take a leave of absence to go kind of see if I can't figure out a different way of doing it. And I grew up with hippie parents. So I grew up with, a vegetable farm and, horse ranch and all of those things. And we shopped at a natural food store, not at a grocery store.
Nice.
So I kind of knew like there was something else missing. And during my leave of absence, I, of course, hit Dr. Google really hard and found a gentleman by the name of Chris Kresser, who's pretty well known in the functional medicine space now.
I know of him. Yeah.
Yeah. He had written a blog article about Hashimoto's and how it's an autoimmune condition. And that when we have an autoimmune condition, that it's not a disease of the organ in which is being quote unquote attacked. It's a disease of the immune system. And so you need to kind of like go for that root cause and figure that out. And I read that and that clicked. And I was like, that makes so much sense. Okay, where's this guy? I don't care if he's in Boston, Chicago. I don't care. I'm going to go see him. And I got lucky because he was in the Bay Area at the time. And he was in a little office in Berkeley and he took on my case. And that's how it got started. And that's how I kind of, got hooked on the functional medicine side of stuff.
That's amazing. So is it caused by an overactive immune system that is like making the thyroid overactive and then like burning it out, and then it's like underactive? Like, how does that function? I mean, my whole path is on healing and stuff. So like, and especially autoimmune things really fascinate me. And as you know, a lot of mushrooms, reishi, turkey tail, chaga, a lot of these mushrooms are immunomodulators.
Yes, they
so
are.
they can help people with underactive immune systems upregulate, or overactive, or producing autoimmune disorders, help their immune system underregulate. So could you describe like a little bit of the functionality of like the immune issue with the Hashimoto's?
Yeah, I mean, the way that I describe all autoimmune conditions is there's a couple of different things that are at play here. So we know that autoimmunity is directly connected to a condition called leaky gut or intestinal permeability.
Right.
And intestinal permeability, basically in layman's terms, means more things are getting into the inside of the body, because we've got these giant holes, if you can imagine, these giant holes in our intestines, and we're allowing things to get across that barrier that are much larger antigens. Antigen is the scientific word for, a piece of food, for example. Instead of it being digested down to an amino acid, it's a piece of protein that goes across, right? So it's a much larger particle that goes across. So what will happen in that case is the immune system sees it and it's like, oh, this is an invader. And so then it will build these antibodies towards these antigens. And when it builds the antibodies, what we have is we have what's called molecular mimicry. And the antigen for a particular protein that's found in gluten, so it's called the gliadin, that's a protein metabolite, if you will, of gluten, becomes gliadin. Gliadin crosses that barrier.
Mm-hmm.
We get an antibody to gliadin. Well, guess what? It looks just like, if you're looking at a lock and key, so I'll use my knuckle, right? If this is gliadin and the antibody is attaching to this site looks just like thyroid tissue.
Oh.
Yes. So
Okay.
the immune system then recognizes thyroid tissue that looks just like this, and then will tag those cells for destruction.
Okay.
And so that's the mechanism by which autoimmunity happens. So leading up to those things, there's a lot of things that can contribute to leaky gut. It's not the only mechanism. We also know that certain types of infectious disease can trigger autoimmunity and that molecular mimicry thing to happen. And so really underlying all of this is looking at a much broader spectrum of people's overall health. Yeah. And so once Chris and I started to do that, then I started to see some of my symptoms from the Hashimoto's start to get a lot better. And he found a lot. Put it that way. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I do know somebody with Hashimoto. I know a couple people with Hashimoto's. If you had any suggestions for them, I know you yourself are a wellness coach and you've dealt with this on your own.
Yeah.
What steps do you think that they should take to begin their path of healing? Probably
well, definitely
somebody like you, right?
I would say find a functional medicine practitioner that can help you, because there's a lot of different aspects here. There's diet, lifestyle, how are you mitigating the stressors that we have in this world? All of these things can go into creating this condition or this like perfect storm of things to happen. A great place to start, especially for people with Hashimoto's. I'm not going to talk about Graves because that's a different antigen, but with Hashimoto's, getting rid of gluten, like hands down, will help those thyroid antibodies come down, because now we're not constantly introducing gliadin to the environment and creating more and more antibodies. So the less the immune system sees the quote unquote invader, the less that those antibodies are going to hang around, and then those antibodies will come down, which will then allow the thyroid to do its job. But I would say definitely working with somebody from that functional medicine perspective that can take that 30,000 foot view and really look at your entire history, because we know now for autoimmune, it's not just the food we eat and the lifestyle that we lead. It's also very connected to the childhood traumatic events that we have. And so there's something called the ACE scores, which is the adverse childhood events. I'm not sure if you've heard of ACE scoring, but you can find a quiz on the internet for ACE score. And it talks about, your childhood, like what kinds of things did you witness? What kinds of things did you experience? And people with higher ACE scores are highly correlated with autoimmune disease. So we know, yes. Wow. Yeah. And so it's unhealed trauma.
That makes so much sense. I mean, there's so many things, like there's been so much coming out lately about like how much of our body problems are emotional or mental damage that has been done, currently or in the past, and how much of it is purely physical. And I think that we're finding that a lot of it is mental, emotional, spiritual. And it's wild, because it's like, you think about like the analogy of like how our body's attacking itself, and how it's like basically saying like it's like you're saying to yourself, I don't want you. And how much of people's childhoods is like being rejected by family members, parents, loved ones, and like the world is like affirming that trauma cycle.
How much negative self-talk does somebody have?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's huge. My practice early on was all about the biochemistry. So, I had an undergraduate degree in biochemistry, so it was definitely pretty fitting that I was learning this functional medicine stuff. And Chris, man, bless his heart, he put up with every single email that I would come back and say, hey, do you have a couple research articles that I can read about molecular mimicry? Or, he fed me PubMed articles all the time.
Nice.
And I
Nice.
was just eating it up. Right. So in the first, I would say, half of my practice, so I've been doing this now for just over a decade. I would really just focus on the physical, on the biology piece of it, the biochemistry piece of it. And what I started to notice is that while a lot of clients felt better, they maybe got to that 80% better, and then they would plateau. And so I started asking myself, is there more? Is there something else here that can be related to why we're not getting past the biochemistry piece of it? And I personally got interested in mindset, for sure, like what's going on in terms of attitude and, thoughts and that kind of thing. And that led me down the path of getting certified as a spiritual coach, which then led me towards doing my most recent trainings using things like neurolinguistic programming, subconscious work, emotional processing, energetics. Like, it's really become clear to me in the last several years that we're dealing with more than just the physical body. We are dealing with the emotional body, the energetic body, and the spiritual body. And if we are not taking a look at that, it's beyond 30,000 foot view now. It is like universal view, right? If we're not taking the meta view of it, we're missing an important piece of it. Absolutely. And so as I went through those trainings, I was discovering my own trauma events from childhood and healing those things and learning how to process emotions in a healthy way and learning how to access the subconscious through language and different kinds of exercises and all of that stuff. And I started to notice that while I had, with Chris's help and just focusing on the biology, the Hashimoto's went into remission. The Raynaud's didn't. And
you
the migraines didn't. Yes.
Okay. My wife has Raynaud's as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when I started to look at the other aspects of it, it really helped me start to put those other symptoms into remission. And the Raynaud's just recently is completely gone. Wow. Like I can do cold plunges now and not have cadaver hands at the end of it. Wow, that's which is pretty amazing. Yeah.
Well, yeah, man, there's just so much there. Like, I thank you so much for sharing all that. It's so beautiful to hear your own healing journey, and the fact that you are helping others is just, amazing. And I love how you started with your undergrad in biochemistry, and through the process of all of that, like, you realized, like, you're able to witness that, like, there's more to this picture than just the molecules, right, and the compounds. And that's something that's really missing even in herbalism. Like, a lot of times, I mean, definitely Western medicine, it's just like, we're just molecules and compounds and cells. And we have these, like, we'll have these moments in hospitals where, like, we do studies on how people that are prayed for have quicker and better healing. And we don't understand it. It's the placebo, and it's like, well, the placebo is a real factor, and if you believe something, it is to be true. And that's why, I think it's amazing that you incorporate not only the biochemistry, which is like, a whole other level of, like, understanding the physical health, but also getting deeper into these emotional, spiritual, mental, and quantum healing. It's just amazing. So, like, how do you incorporate like NLP with your clients? Like could you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So NLP stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming. And when you go through a certification for NLP, I quickly realized that it's an amalgam of a lot of different techniques, from psychotherapy and hypnosis, and all sorts of different techniques are brought together, but in a way that really allows us to work with the subconscious and work with somebody's limiting beliefs or decisions that they've made, to allow them to shift. And when they shift, and I was lucky enough to be trained in this NLP program by a medical doctor who brought in a ton of neurology, which was right up my alley. And so what we understand now is that when we are doing these exercises or coaching guided, it's kind of like guided visualization, to be quite honest. Like that's what the experience is like.
I love that.
And when we're doing it, though, we're starting to see that we can use language to give us clues as to when the actual neural pathways are disconnecting and breaking down, the old ones, and the new ones are being created. And so it's fascinating to me because I can be in session and I can understand when that is happening. And so we're literally changing the neurology of the brain. And so the last 4 years, instead of biochemistry, I've been really geeking out on psychoneuroimmunology, which is the area of science that looks at how is what's going on in the mind affecting the biology. So we know that a gratitude practice, for example, can have a direct impact on our secretory IgA levels. And secretory IgA is that primary, first line of defense of the immune system. Wow. And it can raise secretory IgA. So, what's going on in the mind that is allowing the biology to respond to it? Yeah. And that's effectively what is going on in psychoneuroimmunology, is that whatever we do in our brain, our biology will respond. So if you look at studies of, say, a pianist or an Olympic diver, for example, and they do visualization, the study with the divers was more of visualizing the perfect dive, but not practicing the perfect dive. So they took a couple different divers and did this, and they both improved their dive scores. One was doing it physically, the other one was doing it mentally. Same thing with finger strength. They were testing finger strength. Somebody was visualizing the exercises for finger strength, and somebody was doing the exercises for finger strength, and they measured the strength of the fingers, and they both improved. Wow. So the body doesn't really know the difference between the movie that's going on in our mind and reality, which absolutely. Holy moly, then we can get into this whole other discussion about what's really real, right? But we'll keep it a little bit simple for today. But that is, and I can't even remember your first question as to how I got on this topic, but this is one of the, how do I incorporate the NLP stuff? Yeah. So I will pretty much start somebody with understanding what is their story about their illness, their life, really kind of pulling out, what are these recurring thoughts that they're having? What are these recurring beliefs? Oftentimes somebody with chronic illness, they move into subconsciously, but they move into an identity of somebody who has chronic illness. Right. Somebody who cannot be fixed. Somebody who will always be sick. And if the biology is responding to the mind, guess what's happening? So you're going to stay sick. Right. Yeah, you're going to stay sick. So we will start to work on where did those beliefs come from? And almost always they're beliefs that were decided a long time ago. They're just being reinforced. Right. And that's what's led them to it. So I will do sessions like that in the beginning and throughout their program with me
Yeah.
Meanwhile, we're also, if they want to, not everybody has to do testing, but if they want to, they can elect to do some testing. We'll respond to the testing. We'll do the protocols just like we would without, but we're adding this extra layer of working with the mind and working with the brain's neurology to basically quicken the healing process.
Yeah.
And it's been pretty amazing to see some of the results of what can happen
Wow.
with this kind of thing. Yeah.
This, wow. Honestly, I'm just loving this conversation. This is like, I am so all about like everything you're saying is just so cool. Because in my own personal life, I know that my mental state has affected my physical health. And if I look at like even like my birth chart for astrology, or like my birthday book, if you've ever read the birthday book, it's amazing. It goes through like every day of the year, and like if you're born on this day,
Wow.
it's like a little deeper than astrology. It's very
Mm-hmm.
specific, but basically it said like I'm gonna have perfect health as long as I take care of my mental health. And so
Mm.
my mental health is like number one, and then like the body kind of takes care of itself after
Yeah.
that. And some things that I like to do to incorporate positive mental health is gratitude daily, affirmations, a meditation practice, and then I mean, this is physical, but physical health, working out, doing stretching, yoga, and stuff like that. And then one thing I've been doing lately is making time for play every day.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
and it for me, it's kind of like, I take all the supplements. I mean, I make supplements. I'm taking all these things, um, and I forget where I heard this quote, but it was like, it doesn't matter how many supplements you take, all the organic food you eat. If your mental state is in a negative place, like your health is going to be ruined.
Yeah.
I mean, we know just from, I mean, I could just say cortisol alone, like cortisol, the stress hormone. If you have a mental stress, and it's the same thing with what you're talking about with like the body and the mind doesn't know the difference between watching the movie, experiencing the movie, or even listening to somebody explain something. Like
Yeah.
it's all the same to the mind. And so if we watch something violent, if we see something violent, or if we commit violence, there is no difference to the mind. So we're going to go into that fight or flight response. But the beauty of it, it works the other way too. And that's where like the kind of work that you do comes in. And
Yeah.
that's just so beautiful that like we can kind of rewrite the script anytime we want.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that people, the message isn't out there enough that we have a lot more choice in what is happening. I'll say to us, even though that's not the language that I would use.
Like
We have
for
more
us.
choice in that,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
a lot of people live in this world of effect versus cause, and that's what we're talking about is people who are convinced that the life is happening to them are living in effect. They're living in response to
Right.
their thoughts of the perception that they chose about that scenario. And I'm not saying that people don't have circumstances. We all have circumstances.
Right.
It's our perception to those circumstances that is super, super important. And that is what will determine the outcome. So we can be in cause of that and instead choose what kind of perception we want to have about that circumstance or that scenario. And that will completely change the trajectory for somebody with regard to healing. And so that's a lot of that kind of like language work where we have to be really careful about what words are we using? Is life happening to us?
Mm-hmm.
Am I like, why is this always happening to me? Well, maybe because you're sticking with the same perception about the same kind of scenario. And so it does take a little bit of faith to switch to
Right.
thinking about things a little bit differently. And, I think it's interesting because when we start to think about, oh, I have more choice in this, we can start to choose what kinds of thoughts we want to have. And
Right.
then we can start to put those on repeat, which becomes a habit, right?
Right.
That becomes more of a temperament. And then the more we practice gratitude, oh, now I'm somebody who practices gratitude. And suddenly we're talking in the language of identity,
Right.
right? And
Right.
so it's this identity shift, really, is what I do with people. I help them
Right.
shift their identity, because when
Amazing.
we are acting out of the identity of somebody who practices gratitude, guess what? Gratitude practice is easy. It isn't one of those like, oh, I gotta write down 3 stupid things that I'm grateful for.
Right.
Because that used to be me. Right.
Right.
So let's just be clear. Like
Keyword
I
used to.
hated, yeah, I
Yeah.
hated doing the gratitude practice because it felt fake. Well, of course it
Right.
felt fake. It wasn't something that I was used to. And
Right.
so I think it's a lovely dynamic to be able to meld these different things together and start to work with the subconscious in this way to help people make transitions. And then the biology follows.
Yeah.
Almost always, people feel better, pain goes away. And I've had people go through one of my programs without labs and supplements.
Yeah.
Many people go through my programs without labs and supplements,
Right.
and they shift in their biology and their symptoms go into remission. And it's like nothing other than like miraculous. And I don't want to say
Right.
miraculous because then it's like, oh my gosh, now we're like having these miracle healings. That's not the case. They did the work. They shifted their whole like identity into something else, and
Yeah.
their biology changed as a result.
Yeah. And all it took was, well, discipline, but having faith.
Mm, yeah.
And it's really like it's faith in their own healing ability. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, I have this on my wall, the serenity prayer. You know, God or universe, love, whatever you want to call it, grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Yeah.
And it's not about what happens to you, it's how you respond. And
Absolutely.
like I've had plenty of hardships in my life. I've had plenty of amazing things in my life. And I think that one ethos I like to carry, which I believe really does impact my life, is I only have 2 things in life. I have blessings and blessings in disguise. And if I can't recognize that something has happened for me, if I think that it's happened to me, um, then I'm still stuck in the victim mode, right? And whenever I recognize that things happen for me, even if it's something like devastating, like my best friend dying when I'm 21, like
Yeah.
what's the purpose behind this? I don't know yet, but how has it informed my life, and how have I become a more emotionally deep person, or just whatever it is, and so it's not this like rose colored glasses kind of thing. It's like, how has this informed my life? It's very grounded, it's very practical. um and I do believe that that has changed my trajectory in life. And yeah, it's a work in progress. But I am also very careful with the words that I say, because as cliche as it is, so a lot of people say like, spelling, like you're spelling, you're casting spells, but it's very true. The words that you say to other people, to yourself, they imprint onto you, and you're either reaffirming and solidifying stuck patterns, or you're reaffirming or making new affirmations for new evolutionary patterns in that kind of quantum healing level. Um,
Absolutely. And
yeah,
one of my favorite authors is Jen Sincero, and she has this saying in all of her books that is, what we focus on is what we experience. And it is
yeah,
so, 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 so true.
yeah,
And she has a book about money. So if we're going to focus on an empty bank account, guess what we're going to have is an empty bank account. And
right,
it seems illogical at first when you hear that. You're like, wait, what? How does that really happen? But when we start to focus in on symptoms, right? So if we're bringing that back to health, and we start to focus on the headaches, or we're starting to focus on the fatigue, or we're starting to focus on the GI issues, we are using language usually of like, this is always going to happen. I wake up, I wonder if I'm going to have, terrible bowel movements today, or I wonder if I'm going to have a headache today. We're basically calling it forth from our subconscious. So the subconscious is like, blah, 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 headache. Oh, I heard headache. Here's
a headache
on a silver platter. And so if we start looking at the language, instead of saying, I don't want to have a headache, what do you want to have instead?
Right.
What's going to take its place? So we have to say something different, and like, I just want to feel like things are going to be easier. I want to feel, I don't even want to use the word less, because it's challenging, right? To think of the language of like, ooh, less pressure in the head. Well, what do we want to feel instead of less pressure in the head?
Lightness,
clarity of thought.
Right.
I want to have clarity of thought today.
Right.
You say those things, and guess what's going to happen? The brain knows, oh, clarity of thought. Okay, so that means that we need to create these neurochemicals and these hormones and these kinds of things to happen in the body to produce clarity of thought.
Right.
But if we're constantly thinking about the headache, it's like, oh, okay, that's different neurotransmitters, different hormones, different chemical messengers. Activate that pain loop. Okay, we gotcha. Right? You're like, oh God, why is this happening? And does it take practice? Yes, it absolutely takes practice. It's not like we can magically cast a spell with our words, which we kind of are. But we can't say it once and have it stick. It's got to be repeated, and it's got to be a habit, because the moment it becomes a habit, then we stop consciously thinking about it. Then it enters into the subconscious, and guess what? Now it's an automatic thing that just happens.
Yeah.
And I am no longer the one who is having headaches all the time. I am somebody who now used to suffer from migraines on a regular basis. Right. So it's, and did I heal all that with the mind? No, let's be real. Like, I did some things for my biology to help it along.
Right.
But it took adding those extra layers to really get the last symptoms into remission.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. I mean, when people are experiencing physical unwell, physical health issues and mental health issues, and lack of spiritual connection, it can be so hard because it just feels like life is chaos, and there's no way to make sense of any of it. So it's amazing to like have people like you, or like, a lot of this is reminding me of like Joe Dispenza, like healing on a quantum level, or, other people in the mycology psychology group, to be able to see clearly from that meta view, like, oh, here's your different bodies. Like, here's your physical body, your mental body, your emotional body, your spiritual body. Like, let's like, it's like a mechanic, like, oh, we just need to fine tune this, and then like, work on this. And I just, I wish that we had more of this in our society, because, like healthcare doesn't, pay for these kind of things. But the beauty is that once we learn that, we all have that potential. And, I guess I wanted to ask, how do psychedelics play into this? If you have clients that work with psychedelics, or if you have any opinions on that, I feel like it's almost like, I've come from spiritual background, psychedelic background, and I've realized that either one will take you to the same place, and you actually don't need to be on one path or the other specifically.
Correct.
Like, I don't live in either camp, right? There's a lot of people that are like, psychedelic imperialists or spiritual imperialists. They're like, psychedelics are wrong, they're hallucinated, and then don't follow people, follow plants, like Terence McKenna. And I'm like, yeah, but like, sometimes it can be either way. And I know with this quantum healing, it almost seems like you don't even need psychedelics, but there's some people that are like spiritually atheistic, and I feel like psychedelics can help them in a way to kind of like jumpstart their healing process. What are your thoughts on that?
Wow, you said a lot there that
I
let's
know.
unpack that a little bit.
Yeah,
Let's talk about quantum healing first, and then I'll come into the psychedelic piece.
sure. Yeah.
Um, quantum healing is starting to gain some momentum. I'm starting to see more people talking about it. I'm starting to see more podcasts about it. And I'm thrilled because it's not only the language stuff and the subconscious stuff that we've been talking about. It's using what I call, and what, my co-host on my podcast, Evie, calls free medicine. So the more that we get connected to our planet, the more we get outside, the more that we are doing grounding, the more that we are using these free aspects of our natural world, the more we start to see this kind of healing, because, light is comprised of all of these different frequencies and photons that come into the body that allow our cells to work even better. And I was listening to a podcast the other day where they were talking about light as a quantum healing modality. And what I didn't understand, and I think I knew it kind of at a different level, but I didn't understand the mechanism of what was happening. But now I understand the mechanism is that these different frequencies actually impact the way that the mitochondria are producing ATP and what ATP is being used for. So ATP, I'm going to get really sciencey here for just a second, but
Let's
ATP
go.
is adenosine triphosphate. It is the molecule that our mitochondria produces to give us energy. It's what allows us to feel vibrant and vital. That's what we want. ATP, though, we do know can be used as a signaling molecule. And so what can happen is it gets slightly modified, and it's either an energy molecule or it's something that is alerting the other cells next to it that there's danger. It's called the cell danger response. And this is something that happens in chronic illness, that the cells go into a cell danger response cycle, and we have to complete the cycle to get that to come back so that it's energy. What I didn't understand is that the photons from sunlight contribute to this mechanism. So when we are not bombarding ourselves with normal sunlight and instead hanging out indoors under UV lights and that kind of thing, our ATP switches to that cell danger response molecule. And so it's fascinating to me because photons are the level of quantum healing. And if you get into quantum physics, it's like really massively cool. But that is a way that we can actually change our biology just by simply getting more sunlight exposure. But nobody talks about it because we can't fucking trademark. Sorry for the bleep there, but we can't trademark sunlight. Right.
Yeah,
and so nobody's talking about it, and nobody's prescribing sunlight because they can't make any money off of it.
Right.
And so I've been talking about this for years of like, let's go out, be in nature. I know that there's all sorts of things happening. There's ions coming off of the trees, and there's different phytochemicals coming off of the plants that are actually impacting our immune system. This is the whole Japanese forest bathing, right? So all of that is part of this idea, at least in my mind, of this quantum healing kind of stuff.
Yeah.
To kind of roll that into your question around where's the place of psychedelics in all of this. My primary modality and understanding and science has been specifically around psilocybin and mushroom compounds. I haven't gotten into the whole world of like LSD and MDMA and all of those things. But what I've found is that psilocybin does the same kind of thing that I do with NLP, in the sense of when we're using NLP techniques, we're getting access to the subconscious mind. And we're doing that in a way so that we can get learnings out of certain situations, get learnings out of certain emotions,
Okay.
so that we can shift the way that the subconscious mind operates moving forward. Sounds very similar to what psilocybin does, right? Is we get access to that subconscious mind. And so for people who are using psilocybin in that way, it's almost like a shortcut to do the same kind of work, with a caveat. I think that what's super, super important about any use of any of these plant compounds is that you have somebody to help you with the integration side of it.
Yes.
Because otherwise,
Absolutely.
we're just using it to have a good time. It's like, and there's nothing wrong with that. If that's what you want to do, just have a good time and laugh a lot and have a fun experience. Great. You will have an experience of some learnings there. So in my opinion, it's our responsibility to not only have fun, but to also get what are those learnings? How can I use this information so that I can make shifts and changes moving forward, or so that I can really heal some of these traumas? Like, for some people using this medicine, they're like, I cried the whole time. I don't understand. I wasn't laughing at all. It's like, great, because you're just processing those emotions, and at the same time you're healing that trauma. So, in some sense, like, you are served what your subconscious is helping you recognize that you're ready to deal with. And the same thing happens with NLP. We never uncover anything that isn't ready to be dealt with. Like, the subconscious will never do that to you. Right. So, sometimes it's hard stuff, and it's great, but I think there's lots of ways that we can interact with and again, this is interacting with our natural world. These compounds come from plants that we are on this planet, and we have kind of become part of this ecology. It makes sense to me that we are using them as free medicine. Okay, most people are buying mushrooms, so there's a little exchange of money there, but you get the idea, right? It's like, this is a part of the ecology. Why not use those compounds in a way that is allowing people to do this kind of healing that comes from this psychoneuroimmunology standpoint?
Right.
So
yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think that it's such a valuable thing to highlight the fact that, like, I think the most important part, I mean, obviously set and setting is very, very important, because you can create a traumatic experience with psychedelics rather than healing a traumatic experience.
Right.
But after that, I think the most important part is integration. It's like you study during that experience, and then, like, the integration's like the test. Like, okay, how do you apply this? How do you prove what you learned, or, like, how do you apply this to life? Because I know some people that trip after trip after trip, and not really much changes. And then I know other people that'll do like one intentional trip, like, every year, or, like, twice a year, or once a decade, and it like they're really serious about it, and they spend a lot of time integrating afterwards, and you can see how they change in a positive way.
A lot of NLP is based off of bringing the learnings out, making them aware, right? So bringing it out into the conscious mind, being able to talk about it. But then the key thing is, what are the actions that somebody is going to take? And that's how this is literally, now we're talking about manifestation. How do we take an idea and make it into a 3D reality? It's because there are actions that are taken after that. And so identifying what are those actions that are in alignment with the learning, or in alignment with the new belief, or in alignment with the new identity. Once we have those actions in place, then it's the process of, okay, let's put those actions on repeat so that they become that habit, right? And then suddenly we're not thinking about how we're brushing our teeth in the morning. We just get up and do it.
Yeah.
Right? It just becomes part of who we are. And this is the massive shift that I see in clients. And I think psychedelics have a way of being able to provide that for people, without having to have it take a lifetime to get
Right.
these learnings,
Right.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like there's some people that are like so stuck in their ways that like that and maybe they don't have the best discipline either, or maybe they don't have a program or a coach like you. And something like psychedelics with really healthy integration can kind of like jackhammer the concrete of their
Mhm.
personality and like really break up the subsoil and like, change things up, which can be very terrifying for some people.
Yeah.
Some people just don't have the mental capacity or the correct, the mental health for psychedelics. So just differentiating, like, if you can say it, what kind of people may be better candidates for NLP versus psychedelics,
Mm.
or is
You
it
know,
not so simple?
it's that's a really great question. I've never actually thought about that before. Your your point about some people don't qualify for psychedelics, and qualify is a very loose term because there isn't a lot of authority or governing bodies on the qualification there. But there are certain cases where it's ill-advised, put it that
Yeah.
way,
Yeah.
right? So, and if that's the case, with certain types of mental illness or mental episodes or whatever, then NLP would be a great thing because it's just talking.
Right. It's
All it
very
is.
safe.
It's very safe. There's no compounds involved. We're not changing your brain chemistry in any way. We're not messing with your neurotransmitter receptors in any way, right? So it's just talking.
Yeah.
And, if somebody is skilled in their NLP training, they're going to understand when they are dealing with something that is maybe highly traumatic or highly triggering for somebody. And there are techniques on how to do this work so that it's a safer approach. There's never,
Hmm.
the way that it differs in my mind between traditional CBT is that we're not asking anybody to relive anything.
Yeah.
And instead we're getting the mind into a state, so into a different kind of brainwave state, so
Hmm.
that we can actually access the learnings, which
Yeah.
is really, really kind of a cool thing. So it's open for just about anybody. I think anybody could use NLP. I think most people can use psychedelics as a way to do that. But
Hmm.
again, having somebody to help you figure out, okay, I got all these learnings, it's really about putting the rubber to the road
Yeah.
and really starting to put those things into action. That's where the work is.
Right.
Inner work is not this like, it's sure some inner work is done in meditation, but it's not the meditation. It's what's done afterwards. Right. And it's
Totally.
the same kind of thing
Yeah.
with the psychedelic experiences. It's what's
Yeah.
done afterwards. And for people who do microdosing, what I like about microdosing is that it's done at such a sub-perceptual level that you're still able to get these learnings and ahas and new insights, but they come at micro intervals. So it's
Yes.
easier to integrate if you're getting them just kind of fed to you one at a time instead
Right.
of a fire hose of stuff. And now you got to like unpack all of that and then figure it all out. This is why some people do these experiences once every decade, because there's
Right.
so much.
Yeah.
And so, it's really about how do you unpack that and how do you integrate that into your life. And you were talking about these people who will do these experiences, yet they go back to their old ways. And that reminded me of the analogy that I use for neural pathways, which is, imagine a luge track, right? And you've got this
Hmm.
icy track and you've
Yeah.
got a bobsled. And our pattern in old ways are this like slick luge track.
Yeah.
And we can get on that sled and we can be shot off the end of it before we're even aware of what we're doing. And what can happen with NLP and with psychedelics is you are now suddenly presented with a new path, but it's brand new. So that
Yeah.
means snowshoes. We're starting with the basics. We're taking snowshoes and we're patterning in a path, right? And then we're going to like take the snowblower and make it really wide. Okay, cool. That's good. But we got to like build the track, place the ice on it, so that what happens is when you're presented with the same scenario, the brain is like, I'm confused. I don't know which one to go down. Yes, we're getting somewhere, right? Like confusion is good because now you get to choose. Do I go down the new one? Or do I go down the old one? And
Okay.
so, that is a really great place to be. And then with NLP, some of the techniques that I use, we actually take that old luge track and we take the chainsaw to the legs and we start like cutting it up and breaking it down. So the brain doesn't even have that option anymore. It's harder to go down that one and easier to go down the snowshoe path. And that's what we want, is we want that brain efficiency to be able to go towards that. So when my clients come to me and they're like, I'm really confused, I'm like, fabulous. This is amazing because now we're getting somewhere with the neurology.
Yeah. Like yeah, confusion is a better place than being stuck, I guess. And also too, I mean, it's interesting. Like we're talking about neuroplasticity here a lot, right?
Yes,
And
that's exactly what we're talking about.
Many people may or may not know psilocybin increases neuroplasticity, which is the ability to adapt and overcome to new changes or challenges. And what you're talking about with neuro-linguistic programming, is that a neuron and axon?
This is a neuron, right?
Nice.
And so neuroplasticity. So for everybody who's kind of like, what does that mean? So these are called dendrites. Yep, dendrites. And all neurons look this cute. Just saying. Gosh. These dendrites start to reach out to new cells in the presence of psilocybin. And that is neuroplasticity. Yeah.
That's incredible. So if you could show those dendrites again, that's the I'm trying to think.
This is the plush version.
I love it. This is going on in my brain right now. I know it is. The oligodendroglial. Am I saying that right? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oligodendroglial. Yeah.
Yes. Amanita muscaria's main compound, muscimol, protects those cells from cell death. So it can actually increase neuroprotection, which is interesting. That's why
amazing.
That's why like some people actually will incorporate Amanita and psilocybin, and potentially even lion's mane for the neurogenesis.
Yeah.
So that's beautiful. Thanks for sharing that.
You're welcome. So imagine a bunch of these connected together. Yeah. That's a neural pathway. And so when we are destroying that luge track, we are disconnecting them. And then these guys, the dendrites, start to search. And they're like, who else can I find? I need to pair up with somebody. Yeah. And they make a new neural pathway. And it's amazing.
And that's literally cool. Like that analogy, that visualization is literally how we change our life.
Yes.
That is literally how.
Yes, it is.
That is like
it's how we change our biology.
Yeah.
It's how we change the things that are happening in our life. It's
That's amazing.
Pretty wild and amazing.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you about, man, there's so many things I want to ask you about. I don't know how much time you have, but you still have a little bit of time, or what do you think?
I do. Yeah. Okay. No, I blocked off the full 2 hours. We've got 40 minutes. Okay.
Well, let's just keep rolling then. Because
you can turn this into a 2-parter if you want to.
I just, there's so much here, and these are all things I'm passionate about. And that's why I wanted to interview everybody who works with mycology, psychology, because this is just this is my jam. And I really love the fact that, I wanted to ask you about your Wellness Curiosity Collective retreats. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, so, the Wellness Curiosity Collective is an online community, and then the retreats are in-person experiences.
Okay. Yep. So could you talk about those retreats, those in-person experiences?
Sure.
What do you do with people with that? I'm curious, because I think that, forest bathing and going outside is such a crucial thing that we can't prescribe, but it's yeah. So
Why can't we prescribe it?
Because it is,
We can
there's no way
prescribe
to.
it.
What's that? Oh, well, yeah, we
Oh,
can
we can't
prescribe it.
patent it.
We
And we
can't
can't put
patent
it in a
right.
pill bottle. You're right. You're
Right.
absolutely right. We can't put it
Right.
in a pill bottle. But
Right.
I prescribe nature for a lot of my clients. I've been wanting to do in-person experiences for a long time. And of course, that kind of got put on the kibosh when COVID hit. And I think, ironically, it kind of increased the need for people to want to reconnect in in-person ways afterwards, right? So in-person experiences have been something that I've really wanted to do for a long time. This year in 2023, I co-host on the Wildly Optimized Wellness podcast, Evie Kontopos. She and I have put together a couple different retreat experiences. So she's hosted some on the East Coast in Ohio. I'm hosting the ones on the West Coast in Oregon. It's already sold out. So sorry, folks, but get on the wait list for next year. She's doing one in Greece because she's born and raised in that culture. So she's doing one in Greece. Yeah, I know.
Oh my gosh.
Sounds amazing.
You said Ohio?
Yeah, Ohio.
What part of Ohio?
She is in Cincinnati. So her business is founded in Cincinnati. And we did this out at Hocking Hills State Park.
Oh my gosh.
We just did it a couple weeks ago. It was amazing.
Oh my gosh. That's so cool. I'm not too far from there, within a couple hours.
Oh, well, the next one I'm out for, we'll have to hang out. That'll be cool.
Yeah, definitely.
So the retreats that I'm hosting in Oregon, which are the ones that are still available, because we've already done the Ohio ones this year, I'm doing two different themes. So the one that's coming up in July, that's going to be the summer healing retreat. And that is incorporating a lot of these different avenues of healing in terms of the energetic, emotional, spiritual bodies. So things like sound healings and some breath work and some energetic work, a cacao ceremony. I'm doing some subconscious work with people and giving them some exercises to work with the subconscious during the few days that they're there. We're going to get out in nature, of course, get some sunrise in, of course, and some sauna, cold plunge, and just have it be kind of a rejuvenating type weekend. So that is the 30th of June through the 3rd of July.
Okay.
And then the other one is called the Wilderness Reset Retreat, and that's in October. And that is incorporating all of these aspects that we've been talking about in terms of using nature to heal and quantum biology and all of those experiences. I found this a really cool property that is smack dab in the middle of the national forest. So we will be spending a lot of time outdoors. I'm going to be leading some hikes, but all of the exercises are tied into the themes of the earth elements. So earth, air, water, and fire. So we're bringing all of those aspects in, as well as I am bringing a chef who does wild foraging. And so he's going to have foraged meals at that one, and it's going to be just amazing. So
that's incredible.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Whoever's doing that retreat is really in for a treat. I mean,
yes, they are. And with any luck, I'm hoping, we'll see, but with any luck, we're going to be able to see some mountain goats too, which will be really cool. Yeah, I've got a hike in mind that I've seen them there before.
Okay. Very cool. Yeah, it's so important to incorporate the elements too. We are elemental beings. So one thing I like to do is I heat my house with wood, so I always have the fire element, but during the summer I will like to light a candle. Just lighting a candle during a quiet time, meditating or reading a book, it's so powerful. Just having a candle, incorporating the elements of earth, going out and grounding, breathing fresh air, the air element, and then also water, drinking healthy water, spring water, or filtered water, because
we're going to have a water sommelier experience at that one too.
What's that?
We're having a water sommelier experience at that one too, at the Wilderness Reset.
What does that entail? A water
So,
sommelier.
water sommelier. So, oh, we're gonna go on a deep
You're
dive in
just
water,
full of
aren't we?
surprises, Toria.
Uh, so I want to curate an experience for them to understand the difference between different kinds of water. And so, of course, we look at in functional medicine, we look at water quality and water toxin reports and that kind of thing. But then there's this other aspect of using the fourth phase of water. And the fourth phase of water, people call it structured water, but there's ice, liquid water, steam, and then this fourth phase is kind of like a gel
Like a
like.
plasma, right?
Yeah, I mean it is what is the liquid inside our cells is this fourth phase of water. And
Okay.
so having structured water and spring water be part of this water sommelier experience. So we're going to take like a Dasani water, right? That's like filtered from, I think Coca-Cola is
Purified.
still, yeah, purified, whatever.
Right.
So we're just going to take these different kinds of waters and different mineral waters and also spring headwater because
Yeah.
the property is right next to a very special river called the Metolius River. And the headwaters that come out of the lava rock are just down the road. So we're going to
Oh my
include
God.
all of these different waters for people to experience not only the flavor and texture, but how they feel
Yeah.
when they're drinking them. So
Oh
that
my
is one
gosh.
of the water element exercises.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing. And I am reminded now where about the structured water, how I had some friends talking about with foraging,
Yeah.
foraging really juicy succulent plants and like the crunch and then their fiber and their cells eating eating that structured water and
Mm-hmm.
how nourishing it is like to us on a cellular level
Yeah.
versus
The
just
more
having
that we can find structured water, the better
yeah.
for our biology, for sure.
Right.
It's our cells operate better with structured water. And what I've noticed since we have a water filtration system that has a structuring chamber for it. And what I've noticed since we've put that in our house is that I can stay hydrated with less volume of water
Oh, okay.
than needing to drink a whole gallon a day
Yeah.
because the structured water can easily absorb into the cells. So our water uptake actually is stronger using structured water.
Is it we use a Berkey filter, which is good, but I know they're but it's like Berkey is like the best off-grid, simple, surefire water purification system, but I know I mean, I've had Kangen water before. Is that what you have or what kind of machine do you have?
Kangen is alkalizing the water, so it's slightly changing the pH of the water. I use
Right.
a system by a company called Atla, ATLA,
Okay.
and I can give you the information to put in the show notes for that. But they
Sure.
have a three-phase filtration system, very similar to the filter quality of the Berkey. And I
Yeah.
didn't mention this, but my husband studied chemistry in college when I was
Okay.
studying biochemistry. So I've leaned on him a lot to understand the filtering systems and the different toxins that can be in our water and all of that stuff. And so the filter quality is very similar to a Berkey system, but they have an additional chamber that allows the water to be vorticized. So
Yeah.
it vortices down and back up. And that chamber is lined with magnesium. So magnesium is also going back into the water. And so you're
Okay.
getting a mineralized form of active structured water. And so that it's that motion that creates the molecules of structured water, which is it's not H2O, it's H3O2 is
Okay.
what structured water is. So that motion allows the atoms to rearrange into a different physical structure. It's
Okay.
still water, but now
Right.
it's a little bit, you can tell the consistency is a little bit not gel-like in
It's
what
like
we would think
slippery.
like Jello. It's a little bit more um viscous.
Yeah, I was gonna like it's
Yeah,
thicker, it has like more of a slip to it.
a little
Um,
bit. It's
and
not
maybe
slippery like soft water.
okay.
Soft water can
Yeah.
be very slippery. So you may be feeling soft structured water, which would be
Okay.
even more so. We have
Right.
very hard water where we are. And so I would say that the viscosity of the water is a little bit different.
Hmm.
Um, but it feels different. It definitely
Yeah.
feels different.
So I know one thing that the Kangen water machine does too. Like you can change the pH. It has a filtration system, and it also, I think it micronizes the water. It makes it like,
Hmm.
I forget what the term is, but I remember feeling like I could drink a lot of it, and I didn't have the sloshy feeling in my stomach, like, ooh, carrying around a
Hmm.
lot of water.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I liked about the Kangen water machine.
Yeah.
But I mean, there are,
I
they're
don't
like,
like the price of the Kangen water
I was
machine.
gonna say they're like $4,000. And it is a
Yeah.
pyramid scheme as well. Like so I know some people who like, sell it and they just get checks in the mail because, the referrals and everything. And
Hmm.
uh, so, they fit that into their pricing bracket. So, um,
Yeah, exactly. So I don't really like the price of it. And when I've been doing research on structured water systems, it doesn't ever come up. So I don't think they have
yeah.
whatever that micronizing is mechanism that they're doing. It's not the same as restructuring the water.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so like taking water as an analogy of like how we are taking this in. I mean, we are you can even kind of say it on a quantum level as well. I mean,
Yeah.
you, at least cellular, we are mostly water. The planet we live in is mostly water. And if we are in this kind of left-brained, patriarchal, capital capita means head capitalism, society where, it's more about the materialism. It's more about the, you know uh just like the bottom line, and the it's not about the quality of life. It's not about the art and the nuance and the play. You could almost draw that analogy to like the kind of water we drink is run through these lead pipes and right angles, and it's dead and it's full of poisons and toxins. Whereas you're talking about this, like, this water, this restructured, it sounds so beautiful. It's like spun in this vortex, and then we drink that and consume that, and it kind of, I don't know. I'd say that it would probably, just as NLP is like changing our mind, like this type of water is changing our physiology. Would you agree?
1,000%.
Yeah.
Uh, because what we know now about anything that we invite into our body, so water, food, etc., it's all information. Everything that we eat is information. The water is information. And when I say information, what I mean is I'm really talking about epigenetics. So, epigenetics is the study of our environment's influence on how DNA is expressed and what
Right.
comes forward of our DNA, right? And
Right.
so, the type of food we eat is part of that environmental information that is then given to our cells, and our cells respond and express certain types of proteins and compounds and hormones and all of that. And so this is structured water is very much the same. So it's giving the information to the cells to be able to do what they need to do best, given
Hmm.
that structured water, if we think about structured water in a natural environment, so let's forget about the vortices and all that stuff. That's us trying to adapt a
Artificially structured.
municipal water system into something that's a little bit more healthy. Um, but in nature, water flows over rocks. It's constantly in motion.
Hmm.
And our ancestors knew to drink from streams that were in motion versus stagnant water, because
Right.
stagnant water is what creates disease. It's got its
Yeah.
whole life cycle, but we weren't drinking from stagnant water locations as much as possible. We were
Yeah.
looking for water that was in motion. And so if we think about water from that standpoint, the most natural um, source of water is going to come from that kind of environment. And that's how our biology evolved, right next to that kind of water. And
Wow.
so it makes sense that our genetics evolved in a way to express based off of that kind of water. And when we go into this like artificial lifestyle, living in boxes with UV lights and drinking water that's coming out of a municipal system that has chlorine and fluoride and added to it and all of this stuff, now our cells are not getting the right information. So it's no wonder that they're malfunctioning. Right. So the more that we kind of return ourselves to nature as much as possible, which is kind of the theme of my podcast, the Wildly Optimized Wellness Podcast, is looking at how do we, let's look at that Venn diagram intersection between the natural world and wellness and where they overlap. And that's really kind of why I started that podcast, is to start talking about how can we get closer and closer to our natural world to restore our health and hopefully at the same time restore the ecology of the planet. Yeah. And I think that we might be able to get there. And I kind of like the fact that we went through a pandemic. I may be the first person saying that, but I like it because to me, the pandemic offered people an opportunity to get outside. Our national parks are getting record numbers of visitors. Yes, that comes with its own problems. Please, people, leave no trace. If you don't know what that means, please look that up.
My brother's a park ranger and he really dealt with it.
Yes.
But yes.
But people are discovering how beautiful this planet is. And so they're getting outside more. And the pandemic offered us an opportunity to really sit with ourselves.
Right.
And face our own shit. Right. Because when we're not being distracted by going to work every day and doing all the things, and we're forced to stay at home, we're kind of left looking at ourselves. And some people really flourished with that, and some people cratered. And, you know, so it's really kind of been this unique opportunity for us to get reconnected with nature and start to incorporate some of the things we've been talking about, is that our whole health is not based off of just the one physical body. Like, we have to incorporate the emotions and the energetics and the spiritual realm into it so that we can have that whole meta view without being meta.
Yeah. Right.
The corporation.
Right. Yeah. You can put a trademark on Meta, apparently, but you can't patent the sun, but you can trademark Meta. And that just, like, the whole thing with talking about the pandemic, like, it goes back to what I was saying. Like, I have two things in life: blessings and blessings in disguise. And like, I always try to find like the medicine, like what's the medicine here? And I 100% agree. Like, that whole, like, really like a 2-year period for myself personally was like a deep dive into my shadow work. And man, I've grown so much in the last 2 years, more than I have in a decade. And it's because I had to sit down and show up. Like, my life was pushing me forward into that, like, we need to, evaluate some things here. And it's just so, man, and I'm thinking there's so many like amazing analogies. I was thinking about the stagnant pond and how what happens in ourself if we become stagnant, we get filled with disease. And it's almost like life is just telling us, like, hey, like, there's forward momentum propelling our beings into existence. Like, all we have is this present moment, and it's just moving forward. And if you are stagnant, like, you're gonna die. Like, it's just the only way to be is to be moving forward, and that may not be on your terms. It's meeting life on life's terms. Which goes back to like everything we're talking about, which is like, it's not about what happens to you, it's how you respond to it. So, man,
I just want to interject on that.
Ahead. Yeah.
In that, you're absolutely right. Like, if we are stagnant, we're heading into the wrong direction. We're heading to our death pretty quickly. Or at least we're accelerating that. There are times too where people genuinely want something else, but they feel stuck.
Right.
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 So anybody listening to this, I just want them to understand that if you find that you're stagnant and you feel stuck, but you have this desire to have something different, that is the time to reach out and asking for help, find a coach or find, somebody to help you with that process, find a therapist. Like, it doesn't matter who you find, but getting beyond that feeling of stuckness, because what I see a lot with chronic illness has a lot to do with the nervous system status, and the nervous system can be in fight or flight, and it can be in what we call parasympathetic, which is the rest, digest, heal mode, which is where we want it. But fight or flight also has this component of freeze, fight, flight, freeze.
Right.
And it's when we're in that freeze state of like, I don't know what to do, but I'm just going to stay here because I don't know what to do.
Very true.
That too is the nervous system stuck in the sympathetic state. And so part of the work that I do with clients is getting them to work with their nervous system and getting it to shift over into the parasympathetic. It might be for 10 seconds the first time, and then it goes right back, right? And then we just practice, though. And the more that they can get ambidextrous with their nervous system, the more that they can get that flexibility, the easier the rest of this stuff is. So just because you find yourself in a stagnant pond right now does not mean that you are destined for death.
Absolutely.
You can absolutely make those shifts, but it may require reaching out for some help.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. It's the freeze aspect is kind of newer in our culture, like recognizing that we have fight or flight. That's, it's pretty obvious. It's very clear whenever somebody is running away or going in and, defending themselves or attacking, going on the offense.
Yeah.
And the one that is more subtle is that freeze aspect. And a lot of times that can manifest in ways that we don't even know. A lot of times people just tune out, or they, I mean, that could also be flight, but if somebody, like, what are some symptoms that you would say, like, that could happen in somebody's life whenever they're met with some kind of traumatizing thing and they're in that freeze state? Because it's so hard to tell, what are some things that you could offer the listeners, like, hey, you might be in that kind of state, like you might be stagnant, so that they could recognize, like, okay, it's time to make a change.
Yeah. Overwhelm is that feeling of overwhelm is very common with freeze. Because there's that sense of like, this isn't good, but I don't know what to do. Decision fatigue, right? So if you're unable to make a decision, or there's too many options and you haven't been able to pare it down, that's also a state of freeze. And so, or you had mentioned kind of disconnecting. Sometimes apathy can also be a state of freeze.
Like numbness almost.
Numbness, yeah. Lack of motivation. That one's kind of, that's got a spectrum of its own. Like, some of those emotions are related to depression, or they're related to sadness, but they can also be related to a nervous system that is just stuck in freeze.
Right.
And doesn't really know what to do.
Right.
And I kind of put myself in that situation last year. So I did a little experiment, and I forced myself to take some time off from work, like 4 full weeks of time off.
Yeah.
And, the idea intellectually was just like, oh, this is going to be great. And I'm going to be in Oregon, and I'm going to be like hiking wildflower meadows and just tra-la-la, skipping along. And that's not what happened. I kind of didn't know what to do with myself. And so I stayed on the couch and I didn't leave my house. And I was like, oh, this is weird. I feel really apathetic. Why is this happening? And what I recognize is my nervous system, because I like to distract myself with busyness as a way to avoid things, avoid shadows and all that stuff, right? So
Yep.
I noticed that my nervous system stayed in fight or flight, but instead of being on go, go, go all the time, constantly busy, it shifted into freeze. That's all it did.
Interesting.
So
Wow.
it took me a while to really start to get myself into a place of, oh, this is a nervous system thing, and I need to move this over here. There were also some emotion stuff that I needed to look at and do some inner work on. But at the same time, it was like, oh, it's a nervous system piece. And that I had to do some recalibration with. Wow. But I see that a lot with clients.
That's
is
amazing.
This nervous system stuckness.
I feel like you're speaking my story. Like I back in January I went on a winter teepee retreat with my friends, and this is something we started the first winter after the pandemic began, and we were stuck in our houses, for so long, and we were like, me and my guy friends, we were like, like we need an adventure, like we need something challenging, we need to like test ourselves. So we decided to, in the middle of the winter in Pennsylvania, with 1 to 2 feet of snow, go out and build a teepee and live in it for a weekend. And so we were like, this is our thing. Like we were like forged in the fire together, like brotherhood, and it was a powerful thing. And we decided to do it again this past January. And I had some inner work I needed to do. I knew it. And I was like, I'm going to stay for the weekend, and then I'm going to stay for another 2 weeks by myself with my dogs. And so we had our weekend together. It was great. And then I had the next 2 weeks, and I'm a very I'm a go-getter. I'm a very busy person. I have a lot of things, that I can dip into workaholism, to distract myself from deeper shadow work that needs to happen. And it's easy to just focus on something else if you have a billion things that you're working on, right? So whenever I didn't have anything as that, like it's like you go from the fight mode to what you think is like, I'm gonna relax now, and then you just like get stagnant and you're like, oh wait, what am I doing? What?
Yeah.
I don't know what to do with myself. And I had that, I had a little bit of that while I was in the teepee, and I just noticed how like I was kind of miserable, and for a little bit. And I had this breakthrough moment where, I mean, just to like, I wanted to do a whole podcast on this, and I will probably by myself because I wrote down every day, but I think I have a lot of trauma from being a teenager and a young adult and chronically smoking weed all the time. Like I was always in my car and like smoking and like wondering if I smelled or if there was a cop behind me. And I would, I had a lot of PTSD around that, a lot of fear around like imprisonment and like losing my freedom, right? So I'm camping in this teepee by myself. Thank God I had my dogs, because I would have lost my freaking mind. And the white noise of the river actually in my mind sounded like police sirens. And I was not on any psychedelics or anything, completely sober. But the problem was I had no distractions. So all I hear is this police siren over and over again. And I'm like, I wake up in the morning and I'm like cutting wood because it's January and it's cold, and I'm making breakfast. Police sirens, police sirens. I'm right by the river. I hear police sirens nonstop. And I'm also like resisting it. And I'm kind of like getting pissed off and like depressed, and like this is really pissing me off. And then
I'm sorry. No,
you're good.
Giggle.
No. It's hilarious. It's hilarious. If you want to
talk about the subconscious trying to get your attention.
Yeah. Like, hey, you have fear around imprisonment, and you have fear around having your freedom taken away. Like if I could have like, if I could go to the deepest part of like my fears, like being like not being free, like not really like being locked in a box. Like that to me is like,
and isn't it ironic, sort of, that here you were in nature, as free as you possibly could have been,
Do anything I want.
and you were self-imprisoning yourself,
Exactly.
right?
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. So,
Sometimes the
um,
universe has quite a sense of humor.
it was so funny. And like I have like obsessive neurotic tendencies, which can be a good thing where like I can focus on, like my business and I can create like a bunch of business ideas, or I can help somebody in their wellness, and help them like really work on what they're working on. But it also everything is a double-edged sword. So it's a little bit after my first week in this teepee, and it's just constant police sirens, and I'm like really starting to get pissed off now. And I remember, and I was diagnosed with ADHD as a kid. I don't know what that really is, but one thing I noticed, or I remember, my best friend, who passed away, was diagnosed with ADHD, and he went to a naturopath, and the naturopath told him that he was allergic to citrus and dairy, and those two food items were actually perpetuating his ADHD symptoms. And that was his experience, but I noticed whenever I eat like just an orange, like my mind will go crazy. And so I'm sitting there after I cook my meal on the fire in my teepee, and it's a little bit into the last week, and I'm really kind of not looking forward to the rest of the week. I kind of want to go home. I'm in that point of resistance, and I eat this orange and I start to lose it. It's all the police sirens, and I'm counting down how many meals I have to make and how many more nights I have to sleep in this freaking sleeping bag and all this stuff. And I'm hearing my friend Parker, Fungi Flows, if you're listening, I love you, brother. I'm hearing him saying, you got to make it the 2 weeks, or else you're gonna regret not going. And I'm just losing it. And I'm like, all right, well, there's nowhere to go. None of this is real. It's all in my head. So I'm just going to sit here and face it. And so I'm sitting there and I'm just like, yep, police sirens. Okay. Yeah. All right. Losing my shit. Okay. All right. And I'm like about to just like pack my shit up and go to my truck and leave. And I was like, well, I'm not going anywhere. I'm just going to face this. And I sat there and, I prayed to my higher power, and I was like, I'm writing this down like in my journal, like, yep, losing my shit, but I'm here for it, whatever it is. And eventually it got better, and it didn't get so overwhelming. And then I woke up the next morning and I started to hear these police sirens, but I said, you know what? If I'm going to be an insane person, I'm going to make up my own song. So instead of having these freaking police sirens, I just made up this really obnoxiously cheerful whistle. And I'm sitting there, I'm sawing logs, I'm getting ready, and I'm like, do, 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 and I'm like making up this freestyle. I'm freestyling to it. And I'm just like, if anybody hears me right now, they're going to be like, this dude is crazy. And I don't even care. And it ended up, once I broke through that resistance and I went through that threshold of uncomfortability, I broke through to true serenity. And
Yeah.
the rest of that trip was the best part. And I was like sad to go, after that. But yeah, I
Yeah.
just felt like I
Oh,
needed to share that.
that's such a gem too, because that the brain will present us what we need to work on. The subconscious brain will present that to us. And a lot of times it's uncomfortable, straight up, right?
Yeah.
And that is the moment where people will either hightail it and go back to their comfort zone, or they will actually go through it and find what's on the other side. And almost always what's on the other side is something that they could never imagine. Right.
Yeah.
And it's almost always better than where they were, but it does require the hero's journey in that way, right? We're all on this hero's journey, and
Absolutely.
that's why they call it a heroic dose, isn't it? So, it's like going through that is really, really important. And, there are NLP techniques that will take emotions that are uncomfortable emotions and will go through a systematic way of approaching those emotions. And almost always you come out the other side into this like amazingness. And this work requires more courage than anything else that I know, right?
Yeah.
It's like we're a firefighter going into the burning building every time.
Yeah.
But what comes out of it on the other side is so, so amazing. And I just think it's amazing that you did that, because you're right. You could have hightailed it and packed up, gone in your truck and gone home.
Yeah.
And that would have been going back to your comfort zone, and you wouldn't have gone through that experience. And
Right.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
good.
so thank you. And so did you, in your experience, when you took the 4 weeks off, did you
Yeah.
go through a period of the stagnation, and then did you feel like you made it through to,
Yes.
okay. So share about that.
Yeah. So, there was definitely stagnation. There was a lot of disappointment because I was not, skipping through wildflower meadows.
Yeah.
There was a point where I really have, for a long period of time in my life, and we're going to get into more of a story here, but
That's fine.
I grew up with a parent who had mental illness, and I didn't really become aware of it until much, much later in life. But I knew that she had clinical depression, and I knew that she struggled with it. And I was terrified that I was going to be clinically depressed and that I was going to turn out like that. And so anytime depression came up, you bet I would sign up for another course. I would do something else. I would create something new. I would constantly be doing something that required my busyness.
Yeah.
Laundry, great. Sounds awesome. Let's do that. Right. So I would stay busy as a way to not feel the depression. And so in this like 4-week period of time that I was taking time off, I started to feel depressed, and I started to get those thoughts of like, okay, this is it. I'm going down the rabbit hole. I'm going to end up being diagnosed with clinical depression if I can't like knock this off. But I also know that I can't just pick up and go back to work. I had a coach holding me accountable for not going back to work.
Amazing.
And so, which was amazing, because it was tough. It was like, okay, I got to stop this tendency. I've got to face it. And what I recognized in that moment is that it didn't have to be forever, even though it felt like it was gonna be forever. So my clients get this too, right? They like get a regression, they have some symptoms come back, and they're like, I'm always going to be this way. Our brain lies to us when it says it'll always be that way.
This is forever.
Totally. Yeah. So I had to recognize like, okay, this isn't going to be forever. So just ride it, feel it. Don't make it mean a bunch of shit, because we like to make things mean stuff. We're meaning making machines. Don't make it mean anything. Just feel the emotion of it. And so I used what I call somatic senses of just like, what am I seeing? What am I hearing? What am I feeling? What am I tasting? What am I smelling right now? So I'm calling in all my senses in this state of being depressed. And I'm recognizing that I'm still in the same circumstances where 2 weeks ago I was totally happy and fine. Right. So the circumstance didn't change. So for me, that was a big aha. It was like, okay, something else is going on. So just allow that emotion to be and lean into it, just like you leaned into your police sirens, so to speak. Right. And leaning into it, I was able to just feel what it felt like, but not have it mean anything. Because I was attaching meaning of like, I'm going to get a diagnosis if I feel this too much.
Right.
And instead, I was able to just feel it. And when I was able to feel it, the magic of emotions, they usually dissipate in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And then it went away. And I was like, wait a minute, it's really that easy? Not easy, but it's that simple of
Right.
being able to feel the emotion and allow the emotion to come out. And once the emotion comes out, then there's the other side. Then things started to be a little bit lighter. Then I got inspired to do more. Sorry, I need to turn all these things off again.
You're good.
Um, then I was inspired to meet more people and go out and take my dog for a hike and start to do the things that I wanted to do. And so I got that motivation back, but I was able to get myself motivated to do things other than work as the distraction. So that was,
Right.
I mean, that was without any plant medicines or anything else. That was just me sitting by myself,
Yeah.
being with myself. And like I said previously about the pandemic, like we all got that opportunity to just sit with ourselves. And some of us, you know, went through that experience as a growth opportunity, and some people, the wheels came off. And
Yeah.
so it's
Yeah.
about, you know, really being able to sit with yourself and recognize how much of this am I making up by making up meaning about it.
Yeah.
And am I choosing to believe those meanings? And that's where things get tricky, because
Yeah.
when we believe what we're thinking, that's when we get into the psychoneuroimmunology piece. So that kind of
Yeah.
ties it all together.
Oh, it really does. I mean, that was, wow, that's so profound. Thank you for sharing that experience.
You're
And,
welcome.
I know that's kind of personal and vulnerable. So, but it speaks to a lot of people. I know that a lot of people are going to resonate with that, and a lot of people might resonate with my story as well. About we're a lot of times we're just afraid to sit with ourselves.
Yeah.
I mean, we're always like, any downtime, we're like, oh, I got this phone thing to rob my boredom. And really there's such a depth of knowing to be found inside of ourselves that is just beyond the distraction. And like you
Mm,
said, it is not easy, but it's simple. A lot of the greatest truths in life are so simple.
yeah.
But to the mind, it's got to be complicated. It's got to be like technical, and really that's not really how life truly works. And I think that a lot of my earlier part of my life was working with psychedelics and like deep intensive spiritual retreats, meditation retreats, vipassanas, yoga retreats. And it's kind of like I'm just weaving all those things together and like seeing how that informs my life, and also how the profound medicine of just sobriety and like being by myself and like taking myself out of comfort zones. Because in a lot of ways, like with psychedelics and with spiritual practices, we are doing that in another kind of fashion, but there are ways that we can do it that are so simple, like just go outside and go into the sunlight, or just make a commitment to yourself that you're not going to work for X amount of days. No phone. Like that's another thing too. Like no electronics. Holy shit. Like I'm out in this teepee and I'm just living it up. Right. And I'm like, oh man, this would be such a good Instagram story. Or like, oh
Right.
man, if I had my phone, I would be taking pictures. Look at my campfire with all my logs. And it's like, Hygge vibes. And I'm just like, I have this like internalized capitalism and internalized like media, influencer or whatever you want to call it. And I didn't have a single picture from that entire 2 weeks. And I was proud of it. I was like, I did so much cool shit. And like, I can talk about it, but I don't have any pictures. So whatever.
It's okay. It's
Yeah.
quite all right. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. So
Yeah.
good.
So wow. Well, um, we should probably start to wrap up this conversation. It's been so great talking with you. I wanted to ask you about like your bioneuro blueprint program.
Hmm.
And if I believe you had I'll have it in the show notes. You had like a coupon or an offer for people.
I do.
So yeah, if you
Yeah,
could talk about like the business that you do with like health and wellness and
sure.
business coaching, and then And yeah.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So, um, I've started something called the Wellness Curiosity Collective, and it's an online community. It's a paid membership community, but I built it because I wanted people to start to have that connection with other people. That's something that we definitely lost during the pandemic, was this connection with other people, but also to offer a space to where can we get curious about wellness and all of the different aspects of it. Sure, we can geek out on biochemistry if you want. We can talk about energetics if you want. Like, all of those things are there because it's all connected. And what I love about curiosity is that when we are in a state of curiosity, it is simultaneously impossible to be in a state of judgment. And so it
Mm.
allows us to get really curious about what might be possible for somebody.
It's
And
also the same with gratitude.
yes,
It's like impossible to be in a state of negativity and also be in a state of gratitude.
you can't do those. And
Yeah.
it's lovely in that way. And so I created this community so that we can keep each other accountable if we need to have some accountability partners, and we can declare, like, okay, this is what I'm going to focus on. Maybe it's not a goal, but I might focus on getting outside more this week, but I need some help and some accountability for that. And, being able to have a space for people to come together and set intentions together, because intentions are so important, and
Hmm.
have that aspect of community. I run a quarterly nervous system reset challenge, which is a free challenge, but that happens also on the community as well. So we, take 5 days and learn these different tools of, like, recalibrating the nervous system and getting it to shift into parasympathetic and away from sympathetic. So that's always a fun thing. And then I also have people come in and do guest workshops there. So
Oh,
cooking
wow.
classes and breathing technique and all of those different human design, like energetic work, like all of
Oh,
these
wow.
different people come in and give these workshops, these interactive workshops for people, so they have access to those kinds of things. So that's what the Wellness Curiosity Collective is. And
Okay.
so I am giving your audience a discount for their first month on that at any of the different levels.
Cool.
And then, as far as the Bioneural Blueprint, that is something that I teach in the Transformation Academy. And
Okay.
that is a group program where I teach people the basics of doing that identity shifting that we were talking about earlier. But
Hmm.
I've come up with a process that is a repeatable process that people can follow. And I teach them that process. And that is the Bioneural Blueprint, where we're looking at all of the different steps that are involved
Hmm.
in changing our mind and our habits and changing that over. And so that is a program that I've run several times in the past, and I've had people come in and completely change relationships and completely, magnify their careers and find their purpose and change their health. Like, there's a lot of different ways that you can use that blueprint, and I offer that in a cohort, and we'll probably do one this fall again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So that'd be like a group session kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so that will include my own teachings. So I've got some recorded teachings, but then also we'll come together in live groups and kind of talk through the different worksheets and just see what's going on for people. And then I offer live coaching for that. And that is technically a online cohort program. But yeah,
Yeah.
the Transformation Academy is where you get the Bioneural Blueprint.
Okay,
Yep.
cool. Well, I'll include that and all the other links to everything that
Great.
you're into in the show notes for people. And yeah, I really want to thank you for being a part of this and coming on. You know, I think that you have really lived your life in a lot of ways uh as the healer, heal thyself kind of
Mhm.
modality of on your path. And I really want to commend you for that, because it takes a lot of courage to step outside of the painful discomfort of any kind of illness, be it physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual, and step outside of, like, what we were talking about, that comfort zone. It's really like this misery zone that we just get stuck in, and we kind of don't know. It's like, when you're saying, like, if you're feeling stagnant, like, you can reach out to people, like reach out to a coach or somebody like that. But, just circling back, like, a lot of people who are really into the healing path have come from places of unhealth and sickness. And it's just amazing to see that, like, you and your life, like, the proof is in the pudding. So
Thank you.
thank you for being who you are. And
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's my belief that we have encoded into our DNA the genes that we need to heal, because the body has this innate capability to heal. It's my job to help somebody else get out of their own way.
yeah,
right? And recognize how we are getting in the way and get out of the way so that the body can do that. And that at the end of the day is what I'm all about. So
awesome. Well, thank you, Torreya. And I know that people really are going to love this interview. And it's just been such a pleasure talking to you. And I look forward to connecting soon.
Cool. My pleasure.
Thanks for enjoying another episode of the Gab Lab. If you made it this far, please like and subscribe, share it with your friends, leave us a 5-star review. It all helps the algorithm. If you want to follow us on Instagram, it's gablab.show, and there are other links in the show notes. Please follow the guest, and we will see you in the next episode.
Gab Lab.